Welcome back to Discover the Wonders. So, today we are talking about wonders at the Red Sea and in South America. So, we have an amazing Bible story about the Red Sea. Then, I have a more modern day story at the Red Sea as well, and a story from South America, which is a really amazing story. So, last week we had the story of when the Israelites got out of Egypt. So, there were all those plagues, and then there was the last one when the firstborn sons died, and then Pharaoh finally said, "Get out." And so God kept his promise to the Israelites, and they were finally out of Egypt. So now they're out of Egypt, they've got a new life, and now they're on a journey to a land that God has promised them. So they're all excited. God has done amazing things. Now they're free from being slaves, so they have a new start. So Moses is their leader, Moses and Aaron. But how are they going to know where to go? So God does something very special. He goes ahead of them and he gives them a cloud. He puts a cloud in the sky so they can see that he is with them. And so, whenever they see that cloud, they know God is there, God is with them, and the cloud goes ahead of them. So they would follow the cloud. But at night, you can't really see a cloud. So then he gave like a cloud of fire. So whether it was night or day, they could always see that God was with them and was leading and guiding them. And that's really special. And, today we don't have clouds or fires. Like, that's not how God leads and guides us, but we do have the Bible, which is what God has given us. It's something we can see, something we can read, and that is how God can guide us today. So, but for now, they keep traveling, and they didn't go the quickest way to this place that God was going to give to them, because in the quickest way, they would meet with war. So there would be enemies along there, so God said better to go the long way so they don't have to, fight as soon as they've just come out of Egypt. So now they're going to the Red Sea. But back in Egypt, the king started to have second thoughts about the Israelites going away. He thought, why on earth did I let all my slaves go? Now he's got nobody to do his work for him and to build his cities. So he thinks, why was I so stupid? Why did I do that? And he thought, I'm going to get them back. So those Israelites are camping right by the Red Sea. And then they start to see something coming towards them. There's something in the distance. And they realize it is Pharaoh's soldiers coming to get them back. Now, imagine how terrifying that would be. So by the Red Sea, there's mountains kind of on the side of them, and then they've got soldiers chasing towards them, and so they are trapped. And so they kind of panic, as probably all of us would do, and they cry out to God. They're really scared, and they cry out to God, and they ask God for help. Now, that was the right thing that they did. They went to God. But then they went to Moses as well and said, Moses, why did you bring us out here? You should have just left us in Egypt. We didn't want to come out here. And so they start to take their fear out on Moses. So Moses goes to God, and God says, don't be afraid. I will do something amazing. I will do a great wonder. And so God is going to get them through this. So they're trapped. They've got no way forward. They can't go back. But God is going to make a way for them. So Moses said to the people, don't be scared. Keep calm. Be quiet. God is going to save us. God is going to help us. But there's still the Red Sea in front of them, and the Egyptians are still coming closer. So they really are trapped. But God tells Moses what to do. He says, all you have to do is to hold your stick up over the water, and then you wait and see what is going to happen. So Moses obeyed God. He lifted his stick high up over the Red Sea. And when he did this, it started to get very windy. God sent a wind to blow on the water, and it blew the water so that it made a path right through the sea. And at the same time, that cloud that God sent, like in front of them, it moved behind them so that it blocked them from the Egyptians. So the Egyptians couldn't really see what was going on. And so God is making a way through the sea. So they're trapped, but now God is making a way through. He's opening up the waters. And so the Israelites get their stuff, get their animals and their children, and they start to go through the path that God has made. And it takes them a while to get all the way across. But, the Egyptians are still chasing after them, and they start to go through this path as well. But it didn't go so well for them. They're in chariots, and the wheels of the chariots start to get all stuck in the mud. And so, the drivers are trying to get their horses to keep going, and the wheels are all getting stuck. And anyway, the Israelites get safe to the other side, and the Egyptians are chasing behind them. And God said to Moses, "Hold your stick over the sea." And so Moses obeyed. He held his stick up, and the water came flooding back down again. And so all those soldiers that were in the Red Sea, like going across the path, they all drowned and died. And Moses could say to the people, "You are never going to see them again." All those cruel slave drivers, they were all gone. So imagine how excited and happy those Israelites were. They had panicked, they were trapped, and God had made a way through and rescued them. And so they were very excited and very happy. And Moses started singing a song, and so did Miriam, Moses' sister. They all started singing praises to God because he had helped them and he made a way through when they were trapped. So sometimes we might feel trapped as well. Sometimes there seems to be no way forward and you can't go back. And we can also panic too. And we can despair like those Israelites did. But we need to turn to God when we feel like that. We need to look to God because God can do anything. And he can always help us when things seem impossible. So we don't need to panic when we feel trapped. We can pray to God and ask him to help us. So I'm going to sing a song. It's a fun Sunday school song, and it's called "How Did Moses Cross the Red Sea?" How did Moses cross the Red Sea? How did Moses cross the Red Sea? How did Moses cross the Red Sea? How did he get across? Did he swim? No, no. Did he sail? No, no. Did he fly? No, 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 no. Did he jump? No, no. Did he run? No, no. How did he get across? God blew with his wind, puff, 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 puff. He blew just enough, 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 enough. And through the sea, God made a path. That's how he got across. How did Moses cross the Red Sea? How did Moses cross the Red Sea? How did Moses cross the Red Sea? How did he get across? Did he swim? No, no. Did he sail? No, no. Did he fly? No, 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 no. Did he jump? No, no. Did he run? No, no. How did he get across? God blew with his wind, blew just enough, enough, and through the sea God made a path. That's how he got across. And I'm going to sing one more song before we go on to the other story at the Red Sea. So this song is called Have You Come to the Red Sea Place in Your Life? Have you come to the Red Sea place in your life when in spite of all you can do, there is no way out, there is no way back, there is no other way but through? And wait on the Lord with a trust serene till the night of your fear is gone. He will send the wind, he will heap the floods when he says to your soul, go on. And his hand will lead you clear through, ere the watery walls roll down. No foe can reach you, no wave can touch, no mightiest sea can drown. The tossing billows may rear their crest, their foam at your feet may break, but over their bed you shall walk dry shod in the path that your Lord will make. In the morning watch 'neath the lifted cloud you shall see but the Lord alone, when he leads you on from the place of the sea to a land that you have not known. And your fears shall pass as your foes have passed, ye shall be no more afraid. You shall sing his praise in a better place, a place that his hand has made. So now I'm going to tell you a story which happened at the Red Sea. So I have a book full of missionary stories, and this story is called Our Prayer by the Red Sea. But I also like to call it the miracle at the Red Sea, because I think it is kind of a miracle. So this is a family, and they are camping by the Red Sea, on the shore of the Red Sea in Ethiopia. So they're camping there, and the husband and the 3 boys have gone off to try to spear some fish for their dinner, or so they thought. Now, this was a really special adventure for their family. They had traveled 3 days to be able to see this place. So it's pretty special, like when you read stories in the Bible, like what we've just read about the Red Sea, and then to be able to go to that same area yourself, that would be pretty special. So anyway, they're at the beach. They've all gotten out of the car. They've got their camp all ready, and the tide was going out. And so they thought it was a really good chance to get a nice big fish for a dinner. And so the dad and the boys went off while the mother and the girl got the frying pan ready for dinner. And then they saw a big fish, or so they thought. And so they had their spear, and they went around and they tried to get it. And the dad said, "Come on, boys, you watch your daddy get supper for you." And so he got his big spear, and he threw it towards the big fish, and he could tell that he'd got it. But before they could actually, capture it, it flapped away and just took off. And they thought, oh, it's only a stingray, and he's got the spear with him. And so they'd speared a stingray, but now it's taken off, and it's got their spear still stuck on him. And one of the boys said, "Oh, doesn't matter. We wanted a real fish, not a stingray." But somebody else said, "But the spear, it's not ours, So this spear was a very special spear. It was handmade, it was very expensive, and couldn't really be replaced. And they had missionary friends who had told them they should borrow the spear. And so they could go fishing with it. And they hadn't really been too keen to take it because, when you borrow things, they can get broken or lost. And so they hadn't really wanted to borrow it. And it was very big and awkward. But they had taken it, and now the worst had happened. They had used it to try to fish. They'd got a stingray, and now the stingray was gone along with the spear. And so that night, they were laying in their sleeping bags. They were on the sand, on the beach. They hadn't had fish for dinner. They had had beans for dinner instead. But they were saying their prayers together. And while they were praying, Becky, she was a little girl, she said to her daddy, "Daddy, can't we ask God to give us back our spear?" And now the parents didn't know quite what to think. They had taught their children that God answers prayer and that we should pray about our troubles. But this seemed a pretty hard thing to pray about, a pretty hard thing for God to do. The stingray was gone. How was it going to come back? But the parents said, okay, yep, we will pray, even though they didn't know if they really believed that it would happen. So they asked God to bring the spear back, and then they went to sleep. Now, next morning, the dad got up early, came out of his sleeping bag, and went down along the beach. He was kind of hoping that maybe the spear was on the beach, maybe it had been washed ashore. But it hadn't. He couldn't find it anywhere. So they had breakfast, and then they prayed together again, and Becky again said, we need to pray that God helps us find the spear. And so they prayed again. And a couple of hours later, they all went swimming in the warm waters, except for the dad. He decided to just stay and keep an eye on the camp. And with all that had happened, they weren't really so excited to go swimming anymore. But suddenly somebody called out, "Stingray! Dad, there's a stingray!" But the dad wasn't impressed. He'd seen enough stingrays for one holiday. He didn't want to see any more. But then the child cried out again, "Dad, it's the one with the spear." Well, that got the dad's attention. He jumped up and he quickly got a big fish hook and tied it to the end of a long pole. And then he waded out into the water. And he could hardly believe his eyes. It had been 16 hours since that thing had swum away. And, it could have gone anywhere in the whole Red Sea. But here it was, very close to them, swimming around again. And, it stayed close enough so that the dad was able to get it. And he was able to get the spear out, and then the stingray swam off again. And so they were very, very amazed. And, Becky, she said, "Daddy, God does answer prayer, doesn't he?" So that is a neat story of an answer to prayer at the Red Sea. So the Red Sea is a special place, and two animals that live in the Red Sea, although of course there's many more, and these animals live in other places as well, but there are spinner dolphins. They're amazing dolphins. They can leap over 10 feet high, and when they leap up, they spin. They spin around, and they can spin up to 7 times in one jump. So they look really neat when they leap up and they spin around in the air before they go back down in the water. And then there's another animal. It's called they're called feather stars. So it's related to starfish, but they look like a whole bunch of feathers all stuck together, and those feathers are like their legs, and when they're swimming, all those feathery legs move up and down, and it looks quite neat. So it's a bit like a big bunch of feathers all moving up and down in the water. So they look really pretty. But I'm going to tell you a story that I heard when I was a teenager. We got a movie that was a true story, and it's actually was the man telling the story about something that happened to him. But as he was telling the story for the movie, they also dramatized it. So you could listen to the man telling the story, but they also acted out the story as well. And it's a story that happened a few years before I was born, so back in 1985. And this guy who was telling the story, he got trapped. He actually flew into a trap. So he was a missionary pilot, and there was a missionary couple in Colombia in South America. And one day they got captured or surrounded by guerrillas. So not the animal gorilla, but guerrillas who were like kind of rebels of the government, and they would do things like, taking people hostage and kidnapping. And so these guerrillas captured this missionary couple, and the missionary man was actually sick at the time. And the guerrillas wanted the airplane, the mission plane, to come so that they could capture the plane. And so this missionary couple, they were at gunpoint by the guerrillas. They had to call on the radio this pilot to come, and they had to pretend that the plane needed to come to take the man away because he was sick. And they felt terrible. They thought, how can we call this man Paul to come? How can we call him into a trap? But then this missionary man thought, well, usually when he comes, we wave an okay flag, and so he knows that it's safe to land. So this time we won't be doing that, and so he won't land. So then he thought, oh, everything's okay. So because he was at gunpoint, he had to go on the radio and he had to call this missionary pilot to come, but he thought that he wouldn't really land because he wouldn't be waving the flag. So this guy, Paul Dye, he gets called to come on his missionary plane to this missionary couple, and he comes with another pilot, and the other pilot, he actually drove the plane. So they come to this place in Colombia, and there was just about a storm coming. And so because of that, and because this other guy was sick, he thought, let's just land. So he didn't circle the village, and he didn't, watch for them waving the okay flag. He said, let's just land. And so he flies right into the guerrillas' trap. And when he landed, he thought, this is strange. There's like nobody coming to meet them, because there were always people or children who would come to meet the aeroplane because it was in a very remote place. And then he saw people coming. He saw guerrillas running towards him, and he thought, oh no. And so him and the other guy had to get out of the plane. And the guerrilla man said that he wanted Paul to fly the plane where he wanted him to go. And he said, if you just do what we tell you to do, then we'll let you go. And so Paul had to fly the plane. And so when he went to go, because he had a spare key, he had his own key to the plane, but then the other guy, he had flown the plane. So he went to go get the key out of his pocket, and then he had a thought from God, maybe you will need that later. And so he said to the other guy, I need the key. And so the other guy came and gave him the key, and so the guerrillas were watching, and they thought that he only had one key, but he had another one in his pocket. And so later on he hid it in his shoe because he knew he might need that later. So he has to go with these guerrillas. They fly to another place in the jungle, and he has to land. And then he gets taken away from the plane into the guerrillas' camp in the jungle. But as they take him away from the plane, he thinks, I wonder how far from the camp it is. So these are thoughts that God brings into his mind. And so as he's walking, he's measuring the steps so that he knows how many steps it is from the airplane to the place where he's going to camp. So he's got the key and he knows how far it is, but it seems impossible to escape because he gets put on maximum security. So, he's always been watched, and these people, they've got lots of guns on them, machine guns and other kind of guns. And so he's, kind of at gunpoint. So it seems impossible to escape, and so he's trapped. But one night when he's staying there, he really feels that God is telling him that he needs to try to escape. Now, during the night, very, very, very often, the maximum security means that a light will keep getting shined on him. Somebody is on guard watching him, and so they'll keep shining the light on him to make sure he's not trying to escape. So how on earth can he escape? But God gives him a verse because, he felt really frightened, the thought of trying to escape when there's armed people trying to, keep an eye on him. But a verse came to his mind, which is, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but a power of love and of a sound mind. So that verse gives him courage. And so he decides to make a dummy. So he makes it look like there's somebody in his bed, and then he starts to escape. He starts to walk away. Now, this is really terrifying because he knows any minute the light could come back on and he could be caught. But he doesn't get caught. He just starts doing what God has put in his mind to do, and he starts slowly walking away. Now, it's pitch black. He's got to count the steps all the way back to the airplane, and on the way, he steps on a branch and it creaks and he thinks, oh no. But he gets to the plane and it's pitch black, but he sees that the plane is there, but it's all covered up with stuff. So he's got to get all that stuff off. So he kind of had one problem after another, but there was enough petrol in the plane. There was some petrol in there. So he gets in there and he felt along the runway and there was a barrel there. So he got that out of the way. And then he starts driving the plane and he gets it up in the air and he nearly bangs into trees. It's just so pitch black. It was only 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And he doesn't have that much petrol left, so he's going to have to land around 3 o'clock in the morning. And he thinks, oh no, how am I going to do that? He's going to have to land in the dark. So he has to trust God to help him land as well. But he was able to land because after a while he ran out of petrol. But there seems to be nowhere to land. There's trees and there's hills and all of that. But he sees one spot where he thinks he can land, and so he lands there. And then, later on he sees how dangerous it was, but God had kept him safe and got him safely down. So then he was able to radio to the other missionaries and tell them that he'd escaped, which seemed completely impossible. Now, though, that missionary couple and the other pilot, they were taken into the jungle and they were trapped there by the guerrillas for a while, but God did special things there for them as well. And I'm going to read you something I wrote in a book I wrote once, and it's called Miracles in the Jungle. Now, first I'm going to read a verse, Psalm 130, verse 1. Out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let thine ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. Now, what do you do when you are feeling down? In the New Tribes Mission movie, When Things Seem Impossible, there is an amazing story. Tim and Bunny Kane were being held captive in the jungle by guerrillas. Tim was usually an optimist, but one evening he was feeling down. He went to the right place for help. He prayed to God and asked God to give him some encouragement, something special. The next day was Sunday. During the morning, something unusual happened. A whole flock of birds appeared in the trees, right up close to where they were camped. They counted 26 different kinds of birds, a choir to join them for church. The birds sang until lunchtime. Then they all disappeared. Tim realized this was God's answer. The birds returned the next Sunday, sang until noon, and then disappeared again. So that's something very special he did. And, when we feel down, we can go to God as well and ask him to help us. And there was also another thing that happened in the jungle. The wife of the missionary man said, one day she just said, I wish I could have a fizzy drink. They're out in the jungle. It seems like no way possible. And then just after that, one of the guerrillas handed them a bottle each of fizzy drink that he had somehow. And so, even though they were captured, God did special things for them. And, those missionaries were released later as well. So the pilot got out safely And then, that other pilot and the missionary couple, they got out safely as well. So God did something amazing when they were trapped, but God doesn't always do that. There was another missionary pilot called Nate Saint, and he got killed by the people in Ecuador. He was with his friends, he was trying to reach and help the Auca Indians. And because they were scared, because the Indians were scared, they ended up killing those 5 missionaries. So sometimes God does do things that seem amazing, like rescuing people, but sometimes God lets people die as well. But he did something amazing through those guys dying. Through their death, many people in that tribe did come to know God. So whether God does things the way that we want him to or not, he always does what is best. But he can always help us when we feel trapped. He hears our prayers, just like he heard that family at the Red Sea, and he answers in the way that is best.